For decades, the middle class was told a simple story: work hard, save money, buy a home, and your future would take care of itself. That formula once worked, but today, millions of people who followed that exact path are discovering something unsettling. They are falling behind, quietly, steadily, and often without realizing it. The middle class is not collapsing overnight. It is being eroded in slow motion, and that is precisely why it is so dangerous. Because when a system fails gradually, most people adapt instead of resist. They normalize financial stress. They call survival stability. They mistake stagnation for security. And by the time they realize what has changed, the rules of wealth have already shifted. The truth is this: the traditional middle-class playbook no longer guarantees prosperity. In many cases, it guarantees the opposite. Wages have not kept pace with the rising cost of living. Housing prices have surged far beyond income growth. Education, healthcare, childcare, and insurance have all become significantly more expensive. At the same time, debt has become a permanent fixture of modern life. People are earning more nominally, but less in real purchasing power. That distinction matters, because wealth is not measured by the size of your paycheck. It is measured by what your income can actually buy, preserve, and grow over time. And for many households, that equation is getting worse. A salary increase that once felt meaningful is now absorbed by inflation, taxes, and higher monthly expenses. The result is a financial treadmill, working harder just to maintain the same standard of living. But the deeper issue is not inflation alone. It is the transformation of the economic environment itself. The systems that once supported middle-class growth were built in an era of lower asset prices, stronger wage growth, cheaper education, and more predictable career paths. That world no longer exists. Today's economy rewards ownership more than labor. Those who own appreciating assets, stocks, businesses, real estate, intellectual property, benefit from economic expansion. Those who rely solely on earned income often struggle to keep up. This is one of the most important blind spots in modern wealth building. Many people still believe that working harder is the primary path to financial progress. But labor income is taxed heavily, limited by time, and vulnerable to disruption. Asset ownership, by contrast, compounds. It scales without requiring more hours. And over the long term, compounding creates a gap that hard work alone cannot close. This is why the wealth divide continues to expand. It is not simply about who earns more. It is about who owns more. And ownership has become increasingly concentrated. The middle class is often trapped between rising expenses and limited opportunities to build assets. They save, but savings lose value in inflationary environments. They invest late, often after major growth cycles have already occurred. They purchase homes at elevated prices and carry decades of debt. They prioritize safety, but in doing so, they miss the mechanisms that generate long-term wealth. What feels responsible in the short term can become costly in the long term. This is the hidden cost of financial caution. And it explains why many middle-class families feel as though they are doing everything right, yet making little real progress. The issue is not effort. It is strategy. More specifically, it is using outdated strategies in a fundamentally different economy. The financial rules that shaped the previous generation cannot be applied blindly to the next, because the economy has shifted from one centered on wages to one centered on capital, and capital behaves differently. It rewards patience, allocation, and leverage, not just discipline. This does not mean the middle class is doomed, but it does mean adaptation is necessary. The first step is recognizing that income alone is not enough. Financial resilience requires multiple layers: cash flow, asset growth, risk management, and strategic positioning. The second step is understanding the difference between saving and investing. Saving protects liquidity. Investing builds future purchasing power. Both matter, but they serve different purposes. Relying on one while neglecting the other creates imbalance. The third step is rethinking what security actually means. For many people, security is defined as a stable job and predictable paycheck. But in an age of automation, market volatility, and rapid economic change, true security comes from flexibility and ownership. The ability to generate income beyond employment, the ability to adapt to shifting conditions, the ability to participate in growth rather than merely endure its consequences. This is where wealth begins, not with income, but with perspective. Because the greatest financial advantage is not access to more money. It is seeing the system clearly. Most people are taught to manage expenses. Few are taught to understand incentives. Most are trained to seek stability. Few are encouraged to build leverage, and that difference shapes outcomes over decades. The middle class is not losing because it lacks discipline. It is losing because the environment changed while the strategy remained the same. And in any system, those who fail to update their model eventually pay the price. The future will not belong to those who simply work harder. It will belong to those who recognize the new rules and position themselves accordingly. Because wealth is no longer about participation in the economy. It is about understanding how the economy distributes rewards. And once you understand that, the blind spot becomes visible. That is where real financial transformation begins.